Women in the 18th century were primary caregivers, as many understand, for their families. They diagnosed and treated illnesses. They would oversee convalescences. They would record remedies in stillroom books. Through these books, they shared information about herbals, the doctrine of signatures, the humor. It is a pleasure to welcome two of Dr. Mercer's best wenches. Susan Barnes has been a wench at the Hugh Mercer Apothecary shop for almost 4 years. And that's Miss Susan. And after a long career as a tutor, Dr. Mercer says she has curiosity and a love of learning that would be admirable if she was a man. He also notes that her skills in organization and the sharpening of quills. Margaret Materese, her other wench, has been a wench at the apothecary shop for the past 20 years. Dr. Mercer says she speaks too freely about his practice, but she takes good care of the leeches. Where else can you work and play with leeches? I want to have Susan and Margaret take over.
Well, I will have to say we are excited to be here. You know, our good Dr. Mercer, well, he's been called out. He would normally be here to speak with you, but he is college educated, but he says that since this is a talk about women's medicine and we are women, perhaps we will do a good job. So the women are the first line of medical defense. Gervase Markham in 1615 wrote in the English Housewife that women are essential for the burden of the initial diagnosis, then responsibility of seeing the patient through the illness, and finally taking care of the patient through the convalescence. Well, both illness and convalescence, quite important, don't you think?
So, I'm sure most of you ladies have your own stillroom books. You probably have your own still. You have the ability to make decoctions, teas, tinctures. We women need to take care of each other in critical times. We need to keep ourselves in order, and we need to teach our daughters how to properly comport themselves. Women created their own books, using, of course, information from their mothers and their other relatives. Those books are handed down from mother to daughter. Women created in the 18th century, men's work and women's work were very separate. Women's work was in the garden, so many women were skilled herbalists. There were popular books published also in addition to the stillroom books that women would have made themselves. Nicholas Culpeper advocated cheap but available medicine for all, using herbs that were easily available. He translated the London Pharmacopoeia in 1749 from Latin to English for use by the common man. Now, it was published in 1751 as the English Physician. It just used common herbs, things that you could find in your garden, things that you could find every day. It didn't include excrements or exotics, no powdered moles, dried moles or powdered pearls or gold. But it did include minerals and chemicals like mercury and antimony. But those were available for anyone at virtually any apothecary. Because almost everyone would have most women would have their own herb garden or kitchen garden. They would grow comfrey, calendula, lavender, garlic, fennel, all the things you would need to keep your family healthy.
Well, Culpeper tended to focus on evacuation therapies. Yuck. Well, but he was particularly interested in working with the poor. You know, he worked in an area called Spitalfields. Don't you find Fredericksburg to be a much more pleasant name? You know, we also have to remember Dr. William Buchan. Quite a brilliant man. He published Domestic Medicine. Well, it was published in London in 1769, but here in our own colonies in 1771. I'm most impressed with Buchan, as I know Margaret is, because he focuses on good health, on exercise, on diet, and on fresh air, even for the women.
Well, now, Dr. John Ball wrote The Female Physician back in 1770. He focused on how a woman can be her own doctress. We need to know the cures for which our fair sex is liable. Now, Susanna Livingston, she went by Suki. Her husband she was a doctress, but her husband was a doctor, the first one in Fredericksburg. By 1728, she was a widow. And she had a coffee house. She ran a coffee house. But coffee was used as medicine.
Still is. Well, you know, here in Virginia, of course, most women do have a good bit of control over our own health, as we can go to doctors if our fathers or husbands are willing to pay for it. Now, the housewife, of course, is going to do all she can at home, and I'm sure you all are bleeding at home, you ladies. Oh, excellent, as you should be. Well, each bleeding is 2 shillings 6 pence, and it's very important to bleed. Oh, there it is. I brought my pocket lancet here. Now, very simple to bleed at home. It works quite well. Saves you a good bit of money. 5 shillings to go to the doctor, 2 shillings 6 pence for per bleeding. And this you can reset for your next family member. So no concerns there. Now, as you all know, being Virginians, we have certain problems due to trade and due to our climate. Well, 40% of you have the hookworm. It's most unfortunate, and it does cause the anemia. But also here in Virginia, we suffer more from the malaria, the typhoid. Well, it's unpleasant. In Virginia, especially in the South, we do understand that we can handle higher doses than those Northerners. They tend to be weaker and pander to tougher medicines, but here in Virginia we're good and strong. Now, for women, whether we are poor, whether we're middling sorts, whether you're a wealthy woman from a city, from a plantation, even if you're an enslaved woman held in bondage, women understand and are in charge of the domestic sphere. The world of work, business, politics, that belongs to the men. Of course, that is because women are rather changeable and tend towards being irrational. Not me, of course, but other women. And we are prone, of course, to resentments. That leads to headaches. It's a problem for women. Our prevailing passions, of course, are vanity, love of admiration. Well, this leads to an unhealthy diet, often a lack of exercise and general foolishness. Women aren't quite able to reason properly. And above all, women of a certain class, not our class, but women of a certain class, are considered to be weak. Well, the tender, delicate woman, she cannot be active,
But that's why I so like Dr. Buchan's theories on overall good health. Females are greatly injured by want of exercise and fresh air. Confinement in females hurts their figures. It causes flatulence, bowel obstructions. Milkmaids, garden workers, enslaved women are far healthier than most wealthy women. Trash foods leads to imbalance of the humors and menstrual problems. Avoid fashion over health. Tight lacings and clothes lead to bowel issues. Now, There are many theories abounding in medicine. The humoral theory, one of the oldest, also called the Galenic theory, is around from the 2nd century. It's 16 centuries old and still very valid. Well, men and women are treated the same. We're all humoral beings, after all. Women follow the humoral theory in their domestic medicine, often determining the feel by the feel of the skin, whether it's hot or dry or warm or moist, to determine overall health. Considered good health when these humors are in balance, when one is not morbid or peccant to the others. Now, it relied on purges, bleedings, diuretics, emetics. But I'm sure you're all familiar with the aspects of the humoral theory. Now, of course, you have the blood. It comes from the heart, and it's warm and moist. And for that, we brought leeches and sassafras. Sassafras tea will thin that blood out for you. Now, the phlegm, that comes from the brain. It's the clear liquids. That's cool and moist. And for that, we have, alum. Alum for right here in Fredericksburg at the alum spring. And cantharides, Spanish blister beans. Now, for the yellow bile, that comes from the liver. And that's that's warm and dry. For the yellow bile, we have brought kidney beans and pumpkin seeds. Seeds are excellent for cooling the system. And finally, for the black bile, that comes from the spleen. It's dry and cool. And for that, we have senna. We have the senna pods with us, but you can also use senna leaf. And we have jalap. Now, a tea of jalap will make you gallop to the necessary to get rid of
And of course, women must be bled more frequently as we are more sanguine than the gentlemen. Now, the doctrine that I follow the most, of course, is the doctrine of signatures. I'm going to come over here and get my little basket because I thought you all might like to play a game with me. Now, the doctrine of signatures is most important. Well, Paracelsus says he wrote about it back in the 16th century, but I will tell you, all women know that the signature of the medicine is most important, where the semblance of the plant, the animal, the herb, well, that determines what it's used for. So shall we play a game?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, we have some celery. What do you think celery was used for?
Strong bones.
Ah, excellent, most excellent. We see someone with some good medical knowledge there. Okay, now, I had these earlier today. Kevin struggled with this. I don't know if he can get this right this time. Will you try, sir? Well, you don't have one.
Oh, that's right, the uterus.
You were exactly right. Now, note the shape. They're used for the uterus. These are excellent for the womb. This resembles a small seed on the inside. Well, you know, it's not always perfectly formed. Now, we also have nutmeg here. Now, it's quite tiny, but nutmeg is used to warm the womb as well. Sorry, Kevin, for speaking of the womb so much. Oh, this one. Peanuts. Excellent! Excellent. Aren't you glad the witches came? Oh, I'm so glad. This is a banana. Bananas would be used too.
Potassium.
Yeah, well, that's true. You're not quite sure what potassium is at this time, but we do know that potassium will make you smile. These are excellent for a mood lifter. Well, it looks like a smile, therefore it helps. Oh, this one you will get immediately.
Eyes.
You are exactly right, because on the inside there's a bright eye. Excellent. Now, we have the onion, many, many layers. Apprentice. This excellent, the skin. Excellent. Oh, and this one, very important.
Cancer.
Could be
One
used for
of
cancer.
them
We're not-
is cancer.
We're not quite sure about this, but we do know that tomatoes are excellent for the heart. I found this one particularly. I thought it did look like a heart. I was pleased with him. Now, let's see. We've already talked about kidney beans. They're excellent for the kidneys. Yes. And of course, red roses. That's for the menses. You must bring down the flowers. Even the dried rose petals can be used, but red roses are very, very important. That was quite exciting to do.
Yes. The menses, being out of order, it usually happens between the ages of 15 and 50. It's often called the flowers, as in bringing down the flowers for better health. Now, it's most important for mothers to teach their daughters proper behavior. You don't want false modesty. And if it's not managed properly, menses can lead to violent affectations of the mind. Now, aprons and rags are used to collect menstrual flow. Now, to start the menses, if it has not begun in a girl at age about 15 or so, you'd have her sit over the steam of warm water. Maybe drink warm diluting liquids to get it moving, get things moving. Maybe a tea made with calendula or nettle or borage to strengthen the blood, to improve the menstrual flow once it does start. Use iron and Peruvian bark, or maybe filings of iron and steel left in red wine for a few weeks. Mix that with honey or treacle. It'll go down easier that way.
We didn't bring any wine.
No, we didn't
Oh
bring any
my.
wine.
Well,
So
later.
sad.
Okay. Well, now once it starts, do nothing to stop the menses. Do not obstruct the flow of blood. That will cause problems. You must not catch cold. You must avoid foods that are sour, like buttermilk. You must also stay quite cheerful. Avoid anger, avoid vexatious company, avoid trash food. That will also obstruct the flow. Now, if you have not followed my advice and for some reason the menses does stop, you must heat the womb. A cold woman cannot conceive. Now, to heat the womb, first off, you will be providing cheerful company. We are very cheerful company if you ever need help. Now, you can also infuse hot spices with herbs and wines and brandies. Typically heat those. So I've brought some hot herbs here. I have mace, and of course, this is definitely, the nutmeg will warm the womb. Even, although doctor considered it to be quite strong, I did bring some ginseng. Often that's used. The rhubarb, the pennyroyal. Oh, I brought some pennyroyal. Oh, here he is. The pennyroyal, most excellent for warming the room. Now the cantharides, which Margaret has over here somewhere. Cantharides do cause blistering. They're sometimes used in and outside of the womb. Yes, I know, but you don't want the menses to stop. You must stay orderly and regular. These things are called menstrual provocatives. They're used to keep the women flowing. And women are focused most of the month, in fact, on the flow and regulation of our menses. Purges are seen as a step towards conception. Well, you don't want things to get out of order. And an unusual, strange, or irregular menstrual cycle could cause a woman from conceiving. And of course, conception is the goal. Warm the womb, promote the menses, bring down the flowers. Now, in order to conceive, I want to quote Dr. John Ball. In 1770, he recommended for women the most powerful medicine should be taken, which will warm and invigorate the blood and the juices. He calls for remedies such as cinnamon, saffron, candied nutmeg, and candied ginger. And also, if you have the expense, some pineapple and papaya will also work quite well. Now, I did want to tell you some things about different rates of conception. Now, if you're a wealthier white woman, not like us, don't get this treatment, well, the average age of your first child would be 23. Most women, most wealthy white women, are pregnant about every 28 months. They're usually cared for by a younger sister, maybe someone who can be spared from the household. And while they have 5 to 10 pregnancies, most of these women only have 3 to 8 children survive. They tend to be put in hot rooms. As soon as they go into their labor, they're often surrounded by friends, many of whom terrify them with stories of their own delivery. Now, midlings, such as ourselves, well, our husbands are typically close by, but we're seldom spared any work. We have families to take care of, laundry to do, gardening to do. Now, the enslaved women, you know, they do start bearing children much earlier, around the age of 20, and they have many more live births than whites. On average, your enslaved woman is going to give birth every 24 months. And these women are often attended by their mothers, by granny midwives, because their families were close by. Now you can imagine that gives them much more success in birthing. Some of these granny midwives remember things like open air birthing. They remember things like birthing stools that help a great deal and aren't exactly available to the white woman. Enslaved women did often use their pregnancy to get their chores cut in half to avoid wet situations. You know, you can't get wet when you're pregnant. You all do know that, don't you? No bathing. Okay, now, but I will say, one of the unfortunate things that we do all know as Virginians, it is that the expectation that enslaved women would give birth regularly was an essential component of plantation management. Most unfortunate, but quite true. Now, Buchan, who we both admire, Buchan says that women do breed in sorrow, not necessarily because of the possibility of their own death, although that was floating out there, but because half of the children would die before they reached age 12. You can imagine what sorrow that caused. Well, women call childbirth the greatest of earthly miseries and the evil hour.
Well, Abigail Adams spoke of highly fertile women and said, it's a sad slavery to have children as fast as they do. Now, pregnant women did believe that they would had a genuine threat of dying during childbirth, but statistics really don't support that. Enslaved women often relied on herbal remedies to prevent pregnancies or to end an unwanted one. They often used cotton root to the point where it was illegal for them to have any. They also used cedar root, rue, tansy, pennyroyal, poplar bark. All women breastfed as long as possible for up to 2 years to avoid pregnancy. Women were subordinate in the home and had little control over their childbearing futures.
And the men do use the Johnnies. Oh my, I put the banana on my Johnny. Oh, now, you know, Johnnies. Well, they're called Johnnies because an apothecary in England, Johnny Miles, he sold a great deal of them in his store. Apothecaries and pubs, gentlemen can get Johnnies basically anywhere. Now, I will say, on average, they're 8 inches long, typically made out of linen that's been put in lye, or even goat intestine. Now, if you go to Miss Phillips in London, she can pickle the intestine, perfume the intestine, and shape the intestine to size. It will cost a bit extra, but, I think that's probably pleasant. Now the men, they're not particularly concerned with pregnancy. They're more concerned with venereal disease, and we do say, one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury.
Now, food during pregnancy should be solid. Avoid watery drinks. Eat vegetables. Avoid anything that heats the body. Strong liquors. He says especially avoid people with tell upsetting stories about their deliveries. For heartburn, morning sickness, headaches, eat prunes, figs, maybe roasted apples. Sometimes you even need to do bleedings. Now, Buchan says excessive care always defeats its own intention. Now, of course, women were mostly tended by midwives. Midwives should be trained, even to the use of forceps, and should avoid superstitions. They'd be well served to read Snelly's book on the treatise of midwifery. Trained midwives could earn a good living. Catherine Blakely, a midwife in Williamsburg in 1739, delivered more than 3,000 babies, both black and white, and she earned, even though she was widowed for many years, she earned a good living by attending women as a midwife. Now, accoucheurs, the preferred nomenclature for a male midwife. Oh, it's all the rage in France. Accoucheurs were favored by wealthy women. Now, enslaved women were often called on to deliver white children, as well as black. In 1766, Landon Carter's plantation enslaved midwife left to attend to a patient, and while the woman was in labor, it caused the death of 4 turkeys. But even Mr. Carter knew that her duties as a midwife came first, so he didn't punish her. Now, there are some unscrupulous midwives who advertise their assistance with abortions to make it easy to come by. It's looked on as unnatural. It's called taking the trade.
And have you heard the scandal? Oh, you look so... My goodness! Well, Patsy Jefferson Randolph, the scandal at Bazaar Plantation. Well, she was, of course, charged with providing gomguayak for a certain colic to Nancy. Now, Nancy was her sister-in-law, but it was actually more for Judith, because Nancy had been fooling around with Judith's husband, and so when Nancy, she was taking the trade, but it wasn't quite working, so anyway, the gomguayak did the trick. Nancy and Richard were accused of killing that child. Well, it went to court, Our own dear Patrick Henry and John Marshall, they both tried the case. Being that he was a Randolph, he got off. It is the name of power. But it is said that Nancy and Richard did kill the infant. I don't know. Now, it is true that gomguayak can cause a miscarriage. When Patsy was on the stand and Mr. Henry kept asking her about what she had supplied, she kept saying it was for the colic, just for the colic.
Well, that sort of leads to hysteria. There was a lot of that in
I
my case.
often do.
Yes. Well, Buchan says a sound mind depends on a healthy body. Herbals such as borage, valerian, primrose, St. John's wort were used. 18th century treatments included bleedings, beatings, isolation. Now, sometimes country air or writing cures or an improved diet was also recommended. Emotional issues for women were often silenced by doctors. Well, they connected them with the uterus. Well, hysteria is the Greek word for uterus. Now, barrenness stems from grief, anxiety, hysteria, as well as from indolence and wealth, according to Buchan. Both hysteria and chlorosis could be cured through marriage, intercourse, and pregnancy. To get the menstrual cycle reordered. Now, medical diagnoses and treatments were connected with social constructs, leading to the suggestion that women were either with either hysteria or chlorosis might improve their health through sexual intercourse and pregnancy. Nuns were encouraged to ride horses. Hysteria is often loud, violent, vigorous, where chlorosis is meek, quiet, but nonetheless deadly. Chlorosis, probably know that better as iron deficiency or anemia, was treated with red wine, iron shavings, red rose petals. It's called the green sickness because it presented as a faintly green complexion, increased emaciation, moodiness, often suppression of the menstrual cycle, which was a big problem because that blood would then settle somewhere else in the body. That's where we get the idea of the wandering uterus.
Now, not to think all I do is talk of scandal, but have you all heard about dear Sarah Shelton Henry? What do you all read? I cannot imagine. Well, she's the first wife of our own dear Patrick Henry, and you know, after the birth of her sixth child, in 1767, well, her case worsened. By 1771, she had to be kept in an apartment in the basement. She was also frequently put into a Quaker gown. Can't move in a Quaker gown. And she was tended by an enslaved lady, and certainly by Patrick Henry himself. Now, he could have sent her to the hospital there in Williamsburg. That was for the treatment of hysteria, the insane, people with those types of problems. But I think he realized that the care there included bleeding, dunking, blistering, and restraint. Well, he did certainly care for his wife, although after his death he married again and had 11 more children, 17 in total. Quite the score for Patrick Henry. Sorry.
Now, as we age, we come into a new stage of order, menopause. We might experience the whites. What can you say? It comes along with a white discharge, a pale complexion, a loss of appetite, back pain. It's treated with exercise or red port wine, mineral waters. Dr. Ball suggests several purges using ipecac with a little calomel, or maybe a tincture of cantharides with volatile tincture of guaiacum for proper evacuations. Buchan suggests that viscid gooey blood comes from a full gross habit and old age. He says to stay in bed, eat a spare diet, bathe the feet, use cool purges, drink a tincture of black hellebore. For overflow, now that's menses after the age of 50. He says exercise, a decoction of nettle root, alum, maybe roses with laudanum and comfrey. Stay in bed, head low, feet high. The goal of this is to stop the menses. Overflow could be caused by, well, a sedentary life, maybe too much salt. Well, the age of menopause does have its merits, though. At this age, women, especially widows, have much more independence. At this time of revolution, perhaps they will remember the ladies, and women will be able to live and act as they please.
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
You were just touching on menopause versus fertile periods. Are there any treatments for perimenopause?
Would you like to take that one? Well,
Or just perhaps
it's
an insight them?
typically associated with the hysteria. So these same sorts of cures for the symptoms, of course, we're not actually treating perimenopause, but the cures for the symptoms, a good bleeding will do you well.
Yeah, calm me down.
That'll calm you right down. You need some red wine with some laudanum, you'll feel much better.
Valerian.
Oh, valerian too.
Even valerian.
Quite good for you. We could toss in a little borage, St. John's wort. I'd stick with the laudanum. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned Glycom and pennyroyal both for encouraging a proper flow and causing miscarriages. Do those connect with each other intentionally?
Yes. What an excellent, can I be like not, okay. So this, Margaret and I both found this so fascinating when we were doing the research, because you read through all these books and it'll tell you, and of course in our day and age, I guess, I don't know, but it'll tell you, oh, women of the colonial period had so much control over their bodies. Women of the colonial period, they had abortions all the time. Women of the colonial period, they took all these, immunogogues and all that. But what we found in our research, and researched again to make sure that we had found the right, is that the real goal for women was to have a regular menstrual cycle. To have it start at the same time, last for 5 days, no more, no less. They even, to some extent, measured the amount of blood. So many of the things that they were taking, these warming herbs, that they were taking to bring on their cycle, were actually aborting, but they didn't know it. They didn't know they were pregnant, and so they didn't know it. Most women weren't aware, in colonial times, most women weren't aware that they were pregnant unless they had an older woman, a family member there with them. Most women weren't aware they were pregnant until they felt the quickening. So you often hear, and we read this a lot in the books, that, abortion was fine up until the quickening. And then after that, you couldn't do it anymore. But the thing is, most women didn't even know they were pregnant until the quickening. So whatever they were taking to try to get their cycle normalized was frequently causing that. So you're very welcome. Thanks for asking a question. I'm so interested. Yes.
What's your favorite obscure fact or practice that you learned about while you guys were looking into this?
I think for me, it's the doctrine of the signatures. We talk about that some at the apothecary with medicines, like saffron boils down yellow. They used it to treat the yellow jaundice. Rhubarb boils down yellow. They use that to treat the yellow fever. So I knew some about it, but the more I learned about the doctrine of signatures, and so many doctors of the time actually published books on signatures. There'd be long list of, this is what this looks like, this is what you use it for. So I think that for me was probably the most interesting.
And I think for me, how the different things come together and how the women made their medicines and how they used what knowledge they had with what little diagnostic ability they had to really create cures to heal.
Yes, sir.
So You mentioned earlier about having steel shavings mixed in with wine or whatever. Were heavy metals used frequently in?
Antimony was used often. You can go into any store and buy antimony to use as a purge to clean your system. Mercury, steel shavings do that iron puts the iron back into your body. Hopefully they're eating lots of prunes and figs and roasted apples along with it. But
Would you tell how much blood was purged when you did the bloodletting? When you did bloodletting,
it would depend. It would depend on what they were bleeding for, but a quart of blood was not uncommon.
Usually a pint.
Yes.
One of the female diseases that you didn't mention, and I'm curious if what was known, breast cancer, cervical cancer, or ovarian cancer. And clearly with any of those cancers, you can't heal, you keep bleeding. Any thoughts, or did they try to do surgery to remove breasts?
They did. Doctors, of course, they're dealing mostly with symptoms, and it would not have been a middling such as ourselves doing this. You would have gone to a surgeon, but doctors, sometimes if they could feel things on the skin or through the skin, they would remove them. Lithotomies were used to remove bladder stones. Imagine how miserable that was. They would sometimes, if it was a breast cancer, if they could feel the lump, they would attempt to remove it. Interestingly, one of the doctrine of signatures, there's lots of them that are used for breast cancer. The most popular one was oranges, because the skin resembles the skin when you're going through breast cancer. A lot of the things that were more internal, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, would have been probably treated as a stoppage of your menses. So no real difference between what we would think of as an ovarian cyst and ovarian cancer. So, but breast cancer they did work on, and our good Dr. Mercer was called in to treat Mary Washington. Mostly purges and bleedings, but he was called in to treat her.
And I think
I have a question about the laudanum. Where did it come from and how much of it was used? We hear that it was used quite a bit.
Well, you hoped enough of it was used.
it would be, it would be the alcohol that they would be putting the opium, thank you. Words are hard.
Some saffron.
A lot of saffron. It improves the memory. The opium would be imported. The alcohol could be from here, or it could have been imported. And it would have been available until there was no imports coming in. And then they would have to work around it.
So music box.
Yes.
Okay, darling dearest, cantharides are my favorite thing.
I do.
Yes, they're blister needles for those. Used internally? Can I hear more?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like that suffices.
What precisely did you say was used for again?
To bring on the menses.
Oh, no. Okay, thank you. That's
Yes, it would bring on a good deal of discomfort, I'm sure, as well. So
I can't imagine internal blistering.
women were often blistered during childbirth. That excess clear liquid coming out of you. Well, that's too much of the phlegm, so got to blister that area. The legs, too.
And lots of rubbing.
Lots of
rubbing and cupping to Is that it? I think.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
One fella at the weather service, he ate too many carrots. He ate so many carrots that his orange his skin turned orange, and then he got cancer and died.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
I don't know whether
It's
it
too
was-
much beta
it shouldn't be from the
carotene.
carrots.
I've heard of-
Everything in moderation.
Yes, everything in moderation. Yes, as the purist reminded us of that. It's the over of the beta carotenes, but I've heard that happening to people with eating too much pumpkin or too much sweet potato. It turns sort of an orange color.
Right.
Yeah, unpleasant. I don't think the
I don't-
cancer
I-
was related.
The carrots didn't give him the cancer.
The carrots didn't give him the cancer.
There was something else, some of
Mhm.
the cancer he got.
In fact, vitamin A is in carrots, and it's often used to treat cancers and to
Right.
strengthen the body.
So maybe that's why he was eating carrots.
Maybe that's why he was eating so many carrots. Yes.
Just sort of a comment, it's really interesting that the more money you had, the sicker you became, and the poorer you were, you actually were much healthier.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And Buchan's book points that out over and over and over again. He says, women have got to get out, they've got to exercise, they have to be able to, walk and breathe the fresh air and move about. And Buchan notices, in his book, it says in the very beginning, he's like, I observe women, and it's the middling women, it's the working women, it's the enslaved women who have the health.
Well, we have a number of things up here at the table, I'm sure that Margaret and Susan would be happy to show them to you up close and personal. But it is a great pleasure. We had to thank Susan Barnes.